Welcome to the Vintage Hollywood Archive. Hollywood has had its share of beautiful and talented women, among which is Dame Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor. She was loved and admired by many, not just for her looks, but for the roles she played in iconic films. She was a strikingly beautiful woman with a heart of gold. In her time, Elizabeth gave Hollywood society a lot to talk about. Fasten your seatbelts and get comfortable as we review the life of this icon. Why did Elizabeth Taylor betray Debbie Reynolds? Make sure to watch the video until the end, and if you are new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Vintage Hollywood Archive channel. Elizabeth Taylor, the aristocrat of Hollywood society. Elizabeth Taylor was one of the actresses who dominated the golden age of Hollywood. Due to her eccentric lifestyle, her name popped up in several media and press printings. Elizabeth was elegant, regal, and poised. She looked stunning in any attire she put on. She showed Hollywood that women were more than a pretty face, as she was also an intellectual. Elizabeth was referred to as a gray icon. She attracted even more attention from the whole Hollywood society in the 1960s when she became the highest paid movie star. This was quite uncommon and many did not expect this from a pretty face, but she pulled it off. And she looked gorgeous while doing it. What also made her a reoccurring face to the media was her numerous marriages to several men. The media was keen on finding out who she would eventually keep, this woman bound with a ring on her finger. When I started making this piece, I was too curious as to who she eventually stayed with. I am sure you are curious as to who this lady settled with at last. Follow me on this journey, and you will soon discover this piece of information. Elizabeth Taylor, popularly known as Liz Taylor, was a diamond in her prime. She was beautiful with long flowing black hair that reached her shoulders. Her most intriguing feature were her rare striking purple eyes. Her eyes were a major source of attention during the later years of her acting career. At the beginning of her career, her features were described as dull and uninteresting. Did you know that less than 1% of the total world population has these striking eye colors? Her black hair and purple eyes were what made Elizabeth very distinct from other actresses and females generally in Hollywood. She has this look in her eyes that said, "I am powerful and confident." People in times past have speculated that it was due to her features that made her get involved with different men. But who can blame these men? Elizabeth was a beautiful woman. But beyond her beauty, she was intellectual. There was one thing that made her stand out throughout her career, and this was the fact that she lacked criticism in her acting field. She was one of the very few people who didn't attract critics. This just goes to say how good she was in her acting career that critics couldn't find any loopholes to comment on. Elizabeth always found a way to incorporate her personality into the roles she was given. Her legacy spoke volumes of her even after her death. She was an activist for HIV/AIDS and LGBT causes. Are you surprised? I meant it when I said she was more than a beautiful face. Elizabeth was admired by many. This admiration was not just due to her acting roles and striking features. It was due to her charisma and philanthropic programs. Even after her demise, her money still goes out to fund philanthropic programs. Several magazines have featured her in their editions. Among these was the New York Times. Personally, after reading about Elizabeth, I have grown fond of this lady. She was a fashion icon. She knew how to step into a room and command attention. You may pass her a side glance due to her features, but trust me, her words were what kept you hooked. Her life was filled with fun, love, and loss. Stay with me and I shall portray each of these in different lights. Elizabeth had a career that lasted a little over 6 decades. I can only imagine what it would have taken to be relevant for over 60 years. Performing and acting has always been in Elizabeth's blood, as she started getting roles at recitals at age 3. She was born in 1932 on the 27th of February. She was born in the United Kingdom, specifically in London. Her parents were Sarah Southern and Frances Len Taylor. She was the second child, as she had an elder brother named Howard. She received dual citizenship based on the fact that her parents were citizens of the United States of America. Her father was an art dealer and her mother was a stage actress. It is interesting to know that both of her parents are from Kansas. Could this be how the couple met in Kansas? Frances and Sarah moved to London before the birth of their daughter in 1929. They had their first child, Howard, the same year they moved to London. 7 years after the birth of Elizabeth, her family moved back to London due to fear of lack of security. Seeing as Frances and Sarah had just 2 young children, Howard being 10 years old and Elizabeth being 7 years old. The family didn't leave all at once since they had earlier opened up a gallery when they originally moved to London. Elizabeth, her mom, and her elder brother left for the United States in April. Her father, Francis, stayed behind to look after the gallery and properly close it up. He later joined his family in December that year. Francis reopened his gallery in the US. By a stroke of luck, the gallery attracted several public figures from the acting industry and Hollywood society. This was how Elizabeth could get her first role. She got her first signed contract with MGM. After a year, her contract was ended as the casting director was not fond of Elizabeth's features. She came out to talk about how she despised the roles she was asked to play. After this major setback, she got her next role in 1942. She received this opportunity through her father's friend, Samuel Marks. Samuel was a producer at MGM. From here on, she started acting in other small roles. Elizabeth bagged her first major role when she was aged 12. She called this role the most exciting film she had starred in her career. I have to commend this woman's resolve. Despite the setbacks that she encountered, she still got back on her feet and gave it a try. She signed a standard 7-year contract with MGM, with a salary of $750 weekly. When she turned 15, magazines started comparing her with older actresses like Ava Gardner. When she turned 18, she transitioned to adult roles. Her first mature role was in a thriller movie, Conspirator. She was involved in numerous scandals with men. She walked down the aisle 8 times and twice to the same man. Scandals aren't something entirely new to Hollywood society. For you to maintain the status quo, celebrities either need to be in a scandal or be betrayed by someone. Plus, in Hollywood, someone is always backstabbing or betraying the other. In this case, Elizabeth did the betrayal. We can just say she fell in love multiple times in her life. Many people have this belief that you only fall in love once in your lifetime. Elizabeth was living proof that this was not the case. Specifically, she got married to 8 different men. Yes, you heard that right. Her 8 marriages were the only aspect of her life that attracted public disapproval. I would like to believe that the reason Elizabeth got married 7 times was not just due to her beauty. I believe it was due to her intellect and that these men knew what a valuable asset she was. And not a liability. They could see how their marriage to her would be a massive investment to them. They saw past her beauty and realized how she could help them build their empire. She married numerous men, the likes of Larry Fortensky, Richard Burton, Eddie Fisher, Conrad Hilton, Mike Todd, John Warner, and Michael Wilding. She exchanged vows with Richard twice. Although she got married numerous times, she only has 4 children: Maria Burton, Liza Todd, Michael Wilding Jr., and Christopher Edward Wilding. Each child bears the last name of their respective fathers. Aside from Elizabeth's marital involvement with men, she also courted a lot of wealthy and aristocratic men. Would you say that Elizabeth was a materialistic person? Now, all through this video, I'm sure you have been waiting for the time when we would discuss the scandal of Eddie Fisher, the husband of Debbie Reynolds and her famous Elizabeth Taylor. It was one of Hollywood's most scandalous affairs ever. What was most shocking about this scandal was the fact that both women, Elizabeth and Debbie, had a lasting friendship before the affair broke out. However, it should be noted that these women made up and mended their friendship a couple of years after the scandal. I would like to trace the scandal from where these 2 women became friends to paint a clear and overall view of what went down. So, grab some popcorn while I spill the tea on this scandal. These 2 women met and became friends, although they were nothing alike in terms of personalities. Debbie and Elizabeth met at MGM and they soon became best friends. They were complete opposites even in terms of looks. When Elizabeth had lush dark hair, Debbie had blonde hair. Just like their distinct hair color, so was the contrast between Elizabeth and Debbie. But this didn't stop both women from enjoying each other's company. The women, though friends from high schools, parted and went their separate ways after MGM. In 1957, Mike Todd passed away. Mike and Elizabeth Taylor had married and had 1 child together before he passed away. On hearing the news, Debbie was sad and her heart went out to Elizabeth, her dear friend. Debbie then decided to send her husband, Eddie, over to Elizabeth's home and comfort her. I'm sure Debbie thought this was a good idea, but quickly in the story, this proved not to be a good idea. Debbie had said in an interview after the whole scandal had blown over that she didn't realize that Elizabeth loved Eddie to that extent. This rose many comments from the public on how she had overlooked the signs of Elizabeth showing interest around her husband. And despite knowing this, she still sent her husband to go visit Elizabeth alone. This scandal left the whole of Hollywood in shock. In my own opinion, this was definitely not one of Debbie's brightest ideas. During the same interview that Debbie had said the earlier statement, she also said that she noticed that Eddie began to take interest in Elizabeth during the mourning period. Again, I stopped to ask if she didn't see all these signs, but apparently she didn't pay more attention to it and just thought Eddie, her husband, was being sympathetic to her friend Elizabeth. Barely 2 years later, in 1959, Eddie divorced Debbie. This was surprising, as from the public view, the couple had no quarrels or disagreements. They seemed perfectly content and happy. So why would Eddie suddenly want to divorce Debbie, especially seeing as Debbie was a perfect and loving wife? While the media was still in a frenzy over the divorce of Hollywood's most loved couples, they were hit with another bang. Can you guess what this was? Eddie not only divorced Debbie, but also married Elizabeth the same day. The mere fact that this happened the same day was what shook the whole of Hollywood. It was so surprising that Eddie's show was cancelled. And as usual, the press were quick to jump on this juicy story and ask groundbreaking questions like, how long had Elizabeth and Eddie been seeing one another? How could Elizabeth do this to her high school friend? How was Debbie feeling? I can't provide the answer to all these questions, but what I can do is answer the last question on how Debbie must have felt. I will answer that in one word: hurt. How do I know? Because that is how I would have felt. Wouldn't that be how you too would have felt? After the scandal, it is safe to say the friendship turned sour as both women ceased contact with one another. However, a couple of years after the scandal, the two women had remarried to different men. They met on a cruise and mended their friendship. At first, Debbie was surprised to discover that Elizabeth was going to be on the same cruise as her. She was about to opt out of the trip when her husband disagreed and encouraged her to go along with the trip. As luck would have it, they were on the same floor. Debbie decided to try to make the first move and reach out to Elizabeth. After all, there was no need to cry over spilt milk. The damage had been done to both women. The best thing they could both do was to bury the hatchet and move forward. What intrigues me, though, is Debbie's free spirit and ability to easily forgive someone who wrecked her marriage. Would you have done the same? It was even said that these two women were in contact with each other 2 weeks before Elizabeth passed away. Contrary to public opinion, Elizabeth had other talents aside from acting. Although she fully invested her time and energy into acting, and was able to express this talent to the fullest of her capabilities, Elizabeth could also write, and she did publish 2 books in her lifetime. At some times in Elizabeth's career, she indulged and got addicted to alcohol, drugs, and smoking. This led her to being in and out of rehabilitation centers several times. These and more accumulated over time were what eventually led to her death. There was even one notable time in Elizabeth's career where she became overweight. During this period, her acting career started to decline. She didn't let this deter her and went into writing. She published her second book to detail the journey she went through to achieve weight loss. Elizabeth Taylor was an iconic actress. She came from a humble background, the daughter of a gallery owner and a retired actress, and yet she rose to such fame and stardom in Hollywood. I'm sure we can all agree that it took hard work. Although she has passed on, her memories linger within our hearts. Like all good things, Elizabeth's life also came to an end. She had heart failure and passed on. She passed away in 2011 on March 23rd. She died at the age of 79. Some friendships are destroyed by love, some by something else. Watch this video, How Money Destroyed Doris Duke and Barbara Hutton's Friendship.